Hey all, Alex here at your home with the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for part 26, the final part of the Grand Record Collection Tour. I suppose not really the final part because, again, we're going to do the wrap up, play catch up over the last 6 months of record collecting. You can consider that an epilogue, a bonus episode of sorts, addendum, appendix, whatever phraseology you want to apply to that thing. But we're near the end. Got a major stack of records here, so we're going to try to get through these reasonably rapidly, but I'm not really sure how we're going to be able to for some of them. So we'll start with a Stone Cold classic that I think is probably a must for most people's collections. I don't know why there's a fucking sticky note on here with the letter B on it. Who knows? But in any case, it's Who's Next. Again, one of those records where I feel like everything that can be said about it has been said about it. It is one of the records in the rarefied air of like a Led Zeppelin 4 or an Abbey Road or something like that, where every single song on here is a classic rock radio staple, and I'm not really exaggerating when I say that. And for good reason, too. I will say, I think the term, like, hard rock that we use to describe this record in a way undersells how clever it is. Like when we think of Who's Next, and as far as where it comes in the Who's discography, you have Tommy right before it, double album, conceptual record, rock opera, dare we say. And then coming immediately after Who's Next is Quadrophenia, double album, concept album, dare we say it, a rock opera. And those two records are generally like revered as the two like Townsend masterpieces. And Who's Next is like generally regarded as a less intellectual record, I suppose. Which is like, and I don't think people devalue it when they say that. I think it's more like it succeeds at a different thing. But to me, I think this is actually still a really smart record and a really strongly constructed record. This is not like Zeppelin type of like riffing on blues material where there's not a whole lot going on lyrically, even when Robert Plant tries to pretend that there is. But I think, this is a smart album. It's very, it has a lot of energy to it. I think the lyrics are actually, for the most part, pretty damn solid. And I don't know, like, Behind Blue Eyes, which is probably my favorite song on the record because I think it is one of the most dynamic ones. That to me, I think, is alone enough evidence to suggest that this is not just a rock'em bash'em hard rock record. It is a very dynamic album. And I think other stuff like Baba O'Reilly, Getting in Tune, Won't Get Fooled Again, I think that just adds to the case right there. Fantastic album. Having said that, I probably do prefer Quadrophenia, so I do have a copy of it. This one is kind of beaten up, not in the best condition in the world, but Quadrophenia to me is probably the best produced Who record. I think the sound of it is kind of enormous. The vocals on here are probably about as good as Daltrey ever sounded. And yeah, I think the storyline, the through line in Tommy is better. I don't think a whole lot of people would disagree with that. I think it's more coherent. But I am generally more impressed by Quadrophenia. And I think where Quadrophenia wins for me is that I can listen to more of these songs outside of the context of the record. I think Tommy has less self-sufficient tracks. For the most part, if I'm listening to that one, I kind of have to go from start to finish. Quadrophenia, you can pick and choose a little bit more, and I do appreciate that. The Real Me, 515, Sea and Sand, Dr. Jimmy, and Love Reign Over Me, I think are my standouts. A couple of random Andy Williams records that I own. How to explain why I own this one? This is Born Free from... It's the late 60s, 67 or 68, I think. And might even be earlier than that, actually, based off these song titles. But part of why I own this is because really actually all of why I own this is it was a $2 find, and the one of the songs that is on here is the incredibly uncomfortable "Music to Watch Girls" by. And it's not even the song itself that's necessarily uncomfortable. It's really just the title of it. And when you combine that with the face that he's making here, let's get you to really take a look at that. Really just kind of sink it in. Let it sink in. It's prime meme material for sure. So this is actually a Discord server that I own. This is a React for it, and I will probably use it as a React kind of wherever I go. Should I ever create a Discord server for this channel, which I do want to do. If there is interest in creating a Discord server for the Music Deep Dive channel, let me know, and we can certainly look into that. But yeah, I don't mean to rag on Andy Williams. I think the guy is genuinely was genuinely a really great singer. I think one of the best of the kind of crooners who were moving into like contemporary pop of that day. Give me Andy Williams over Dean Martin for the most part. But I do think he was saddled with worse material for the most part. Generally kind of cheesier stuff. Here's Happy Heart, another one that I found for reasonably cheap. From 69 or 70, I believe. So again, a lot of the popular stuff, a lot of stuff that like Sinatra was doing on albums at around this time. Like I feel like half of this track listing is stuff that Sinatra did on either Cycles or My Way. And there's a Beatles cover here, there, and everywhere. Okay, Beach Boys solo records. And by that I mean like the Wilson brothers, obviously, because we talked about Al Jardine, Bruce Johnston, Mike Love, and Blondie Chaplin before. So let's go to Brian Wilson. Here's a self-titled record. Really cool to own this. Again, a promotional copy of it, which is really interesting find. Man, Brian's solo career, what to say about it? Very strange. And this record, I think, gets it off to about the most appropriate start. This is about as batshit insane as Love You, but without a lot of the charm. And, you know, it's in some way, I think the lack of charm almost kind of causes it to work against itself and inherently makes it charming. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I have come to enjoy this record unironically, but there's no doubt that the very off-key vocals, the out-of-tune singing from Brian, which really sounds like he's just kind of going through the motions at this point, and the massive, like, you know, early on in his career, Brian was like doing all of his vocal harmonies himself and stuff like that. He would stop doing that in the 2000s once people realized that, okay, yeah, he just cannot sing on key and it sounds really bad. But these early records when he's doing his own harmonies himself, boy, sometimes they're really funny. Like Little Children, God, it's really funny. Nighttime, just really out of pitch stuff. But there's good material. Love and Mercy, fantastic. One for the Boys sounds good. Like it feels like he kind of put himself together to record that, and is a genuinely good a cappella number. There's So Many is very strange, but I kind of like it because of how off-putting it is. Let It Shine is interesting. That's the Jeff Lynne collaboration. And then Rio Grande, which is kind of a Frankenstein's monster of a song. It's like 4 or 5 different songs or song fragments kind of compiled together into one. Very interesting. If you ever read anything at all about the Andy Paley sessions that Brian did in the late 80s and early 90s after this record, Rio Grande is kind of like a glimpse into what those could have been like had they been made into a full album. Okay, this one, this is Orange Crate Art, the Van Dyke Parks collaboration record from 95. This one is what to say about Orange Crate Art. this is really in spirit. This is a Van Dyke Parks solo record where Brian Wilson sings all the vocals. Um, and there's an apocryphal story out there that Parks tells, where Brian like went into the recording studio, and was like unsure about if he wanted to record the vocals or something, and he kind of stopped. He was like, "Why am I here?" And Van Dyke Parks said, like, because I can't sing and you're gonna sing these songs for me. And Brian Wilson is like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense," and then just went and did it. Vocal quality is better on here with the harmonies that he's doing than on Brian Wilson. And again, the cleaner production, like this is very, like if you've heard any Van Dyke Park solo stuff, like it's that Americana mixed with a dash of classical and early like vaudeville inspiration. Van Dyke Parks is probably like one of the most American recording artists. One of the most cinematically American recording artists, I suppose, that we have ever had. And Orange Crate Art, I think, lives up to that expectation very distinctly and very clearly. Quite a few good songs. I like the title track. My Hobo Heart is good. Summer in Monterey, San Francisco. This Town Goes Down at Sunset. It's a solid album, and it's cool that it was finally released on vinyl for its 25th anniversary. Really cool to own that. That Lucky Old Sun from 2008. Really happy to own this one. This is a record that has grown on me more and more. It is a complicated album to talk about. This is a record that it's credited to Brian Wilson, but a lot of it was co-written by one of his touring band members, Scott Bennett. Scott Bennett he's also probably the most prominent instrumentalist and other vocalist on here. Bennett, he like does co-leads with Brian at times. Bennett has since kind of been ostracized for I guess good reason. He was accused of rape in the early 2010s, and so he left or was fired from the Brian Wilson touring band, and they haven't had anything to do with him since, although the charges, from my understanding, did get dropped, or he was found innocent or something like that, but we haven't heard from him since, so who knows. But either way, I think there's a little bit of a tarnish with this record, which is a damn shame, because for being a record made by a guy in his 60s that's very like nostalgia drenched, this could have gone badly in the way that like Mike Love's Unleash the Love went badly. But the band here and everyone who's involved, I think, made this a very like clean and genuine sounding product. There's a lot of fantastic stuff on here. I like Morning Beat. I like how they incorporate the traditional song, That Lucky Old Sun, the jazz standard, into this album kind of throughout. California Roll I like. Midnight's Another Day is really beautiful and powerful. And they even incorporate an old Beach Boys fragment, Can't Wait Too Long, in the middle of this at one point. And, you know, it almost seems tacky thinking about it on its face, but the fact that it works so well in sequence is remarkable. And it's also, like, we're not talking about quoting a literal professionally released Beach Boys song. That's the type of thing that was on, like, outtake compilations and box sets and stuff like that. People knew it existed, but it's not, like, a mainstream thing. And the actual fragment is really, it's some of the most beautiful harmony singing they ever did. So, really great stuff. Like that album a lot. No Peer Pressure from 2015. God, people struggle with this one. People don't like this album, and I understand why. In the sense that it feels like a very cynically commercial pivot for Brian and his team to make. It's a reunion with Joe Thomas as a producer. I think Joe Thomas has his bad moments. Like, I don't think his work on the Beach Boys, That's Why God Made the Radio, is very good. But I'm actually a big defender of his work on Brian's album Imagination, which is tragically not available on vinyl. But I really like that album. But the thing is, like, I think the material on here is actually pretty good for the most part. I think some of the collaborations don't hit the mark. Runaway Dancer, Saturday Night is kind of awkward. But I like the Casey Musgraves collaboration. I think all the songs that have like Al Jardine featuring very prominently on them really work well. The She and Him cover collaboration on The Island is cool. It has its highs and its lows, and there's some material on there that I'm pretty sure was meant to be included on the like a potential future Beach Boys album, but then that never materialized, so it ended up on there instead, which is fine. Okay, Carl Wilson. I have both of his records. Here's his self-titled album from 1981. I don't have that much to say about it. It is very AOR. A lot of kind of crunching guitars and kind of sickly sweet ballads with electric piano. Heaven is great because it's the best written song on the album, and I think it's the best vocal on the album. Carl as a singer carries his two proper solo records, but let it not be said that this is good material. I think this is pretty underwhelming for the most part. Here is Young Blood, his second record, the title coming from his cover of the Coasters song. I don't know. There's the pseudo disco track, What You Do to Me, that is decent. But, and I mean, the cover's nice because, he's attractive man, in my opinion. And it's a promotional copy, which is cool. But no, it's very average music, I think, at the best of times. Although I will say his collaboration record with Jerry Beckley and Robert Lamb, Like a Brother, there's no vinyl copies of it, but I do own it on CD. That to me is like a really strong adult contemporary record. Like, it is very much adult contemporary in its styling, in its songwriting, and its structure and its approach, production, everything. Like, if you don't like that style of music, you probably won't like that record very much, but I think it is so well executed. I think it is so well sung. Yeah, I like it a lot. All right. Pacific Ocean Blue, Dennis fucking Wilson here. This is a Titanic solo record, one of my favorite solo albums from any artist who is most prominent for being a part of a band, I suppose. And for artists who released only one album in their life or in their career, this is near the top for me too. It bleeds California coastline, like, for better or for worse. I think the Beach Boys as a band live and breathe the like positive, sunnier aspects of California. It is a very optimistic portrait of that region and that culture. And I think Pacific Ocean Blue, there is that love, there is that beauty, but there is pain and heartbreak there too. Even though this was released several years before Dennis passed away, I think you already sense that he is like losing some of his battles. There's stuff like Thoughts of You, Farewell My Friend, that are just so dark and despondent. And it feels like you are watching someone on the verge of self-destruction and you're just kind of helpless. But yet there's beauty in watching this. It is such a deeply tragic album. And yeah, it's such a wild thing. And I think if you enjoy that record and you don't own the CD copy of it, specifically the 2 CD version that has the bamboo outtakes on the second disc, pick it up. One very like tragically ironic thing is that there is a cover, not a cover, it's an unreleased song that he did called Holy Man, and there are vocals on one version of it that's included on that CD, done by Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters. And now, with Taylor Hawkins obviously no longer being with us, it makes that like even more affecting in a lot of ways, especially since I'm pretty sure Hawkins and Wilson were not that far apart in age when they respectively passed away. So difficult record to talk about in some ways, but it's gorgeous. It's fantastic. And I highly recommend it. I think it's better than all but maybe 2 or 3 Beach Boys albums. All right. Let's talk about Wings. And this is probably going to be controversial because I have all the Wings stuff separate from Paul McCartney. I probably will address that when I reorganize this collection after we're all said and done, because I have my CDs organized with Paul McCartney and Wings together, so I'll probably change that. But for now, here's Wings. We'll start with Wildlife. It's a silly record. This is very much in the vein of the album McCartney, where it's a lot of Paul kind of messing around, except now he has a band to kind of back him up. So stuff like Mumbo and Bip Bop, I think, are, your mileage will vary as far as whether or not you like it. Wildlife is very preachy, famously. But there's stuff like Some People Never Know and Tomorrow that I think are fabulous. Dear Friend, maybe a little bit cloying, but, taking it as a response to John Lennon after what was a very tense 1971 for the two of them back and forth. Maybe it rings a bit hollow, but it's a nice enough sentiment, I think. Red Rose Speedway from 73. I should say I'm complete on Wings, so not to spoil anything, but you will get every Wings record here. Red Rose Speedway, I think it's a little bit overlooked, and I think it's nice that it had a reappraisal when they were doing the Paul McCartney Archive Collection box sets, because they released the full-length version of Red Rose Speedway, which was initially supposed to be a double album. And does it work better in that context? Probably not, but this was a very productive time for McCartney, songwriting-wise. He put a lot of stuff into consideration for release on Red Rose Speedway. There's a lot of great songs that didn't make the cut, so Love, My Love, obviously, and Little Lamb Dragonfly, Big Barn Bed. There's quite a few really strong songs on that record. Of course, we have to talk about Band on the Run, because how could we not? Not the best copy of it, but amazingly, they're re-releasing this thing again, and it admittedly makes me a little bit salty. Yes, I know they are releasing like stripped down mixes of Band on the Run as well, which is cool. I like that we're hearing the songs in a new way, because that adds value to this 50th anniversary re-release. But I admittedly, we've gone 3 years now, 4 years without a new release in the Paul McCartney Archive series. There's a couple of Wings albums that we're going to get to that have not been covered in that, and they're still out of print on CD. And I pray that eventually they will get the reissue that they deserve. And then, to me, I think reissuing Band on the Run for what is like the third time in the last 12 years or something like that, I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of it. But the album, I mean, what's there to be said? I think every song on here is remarkably strong. The fact that like Mamounia is probably my least favorite song on here, and I think it still could be in my top 50 favorite Wings songs, or top 30 even maybe, says a lot. It says a lot about how strong the material is. Shout out, by the way, to Denny Lane, who passed away not too long before I recorded this video. I think the song No Words on that record is phenomenal. I already praised Little Lamb Dragonfly before, and he's got some standouts in some of these other records. Although not this one, really. Venus and Mars. He has Spirits of Ancient Egypt on there, but I think that song's a little bit silly, and I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way, although it's kind of fun, I suppose. Venus and Mars, it's close to the quality of Band on the Run, I think. I think it gets a little bit overlooked. No, these are not rock radio staples in the way that half the songs on Band on the Run are. But um, this is like Band on the Run is a very gritty record because of the circumstances of its recording, and almost lo-fi at points. Venus and Mars is fully produced, and I feel like Paul is really taking advantage of that full production to really create like an atmosphere. In a way, especially with like the Venus and Mars theme through line and the rock show introduction, like this almost feels like, dare I say it, the McCartney solo version of Sgt. Pepper's because of how theatrical it is. There's a lot of music hall influences on here, which I like. No, I'm not saying this is anywhere near as strong as Sgt. Pepper's, but boy, there's a lot of good stuff here. There's a lot of good stuff here. Really partial to Letting Go, Medicine Jar, Call Me Back Again, and Listen to What the Man Said. A lot of strong stuff on Venus and Mars. Wings at the Speed of Sound. This is a record that pretty much, like if you grew up around this era, you probably loved it. This is a consistent point of observation and feedback and criticism that I've seen. If you grew up in 1976 and you were getting into Wings at around that time, you probably really loved Wings at the Speed of Sound. But exploring it after the fact and giving it this sort of like posthumous reappraisal, it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny very well. I don't think the songwriting is nearly as strong. They're trying to give everybody a chance at a lead vocal at this point. So Denny Lane, Jimmy McCulloch, and Joe English, and Linda McCartney too, all get turns at the lead vocals. And sometimes it's all right. I like The Note You Never Wrote by Denny. I think Must Do Something About It with Joe English is actually a very nice performance. But again, Cook of the House, which I understand is meant to be a joke track, but putting Linda on vocals for that song, I think even if it was like, I don't know that it aged well by the time of like 1977, to be honest, but it certainly hasn't aged well now. But the big hits, Let Him In. I like Let Him In. I like the tune there quite a bit, but Silly Love Songs I think is remarkable. I think that is a remarkable pop song and one of McCartney's best accomplishments. It's amazing how something that acerbic and cutting lyrically can be transformed into such an amazingly catchy pop song. But that is the magic of Paul McCartney right there, without a doubt. Okay. Wings Over America. I do own this because I think it is a fantastic live record. We'll open that gatefold here. Triple vinyl set. Anyone not familiar, this was, in many ways, I think this is probably one of the most well-known and important rock live albums that's ever been released because of what it represented. It was not the first time a Beatle had toured in America. George Harrison had done a tour in America a couple of years earlier, but that tour was not very well received. But it's the first, it was the first proper stadium tour ever, for one thing. And the fact that it was not only a Beatle, but it was Paul McCartney, dare I say it, the most popular Beatle and the most successful Beatle at that point, coming off of a hit record. And not only doing that, but after being hesitant to play Beatles songs live for a while because he wanted to stay away from that image, finally incorporated Beatles songs back into his live set. And yet it's interesting because it's not necessarily the Beatles songs you'd expect. You have you have Yesterday, The Long and Winding Road, Blackbird is on there, but like Lady Madonna, he's included in his live sets a fair bit, but I would think that would be kind of an interesting poll in 76. I've Just Seen a Face. I think that's an interesting pick too. And having no Hey Jude wherever whatsoever. He didn't introduce that until, the Tripping the Live Fantastic tour. So, it's a really strong record. The live playing is really sharp. I really love the drumming on it by English. It's a really strong record. So if you can make the time for it, I would definitely recommend it. And I think a lot of the Speed of Sound songs are uplifted by it. London Town. I love this album. I really do. The whole atmosphere, I mean, most of the album was recorded on a fucking boat. It kind of sounds like it, but it fits the vibe. It feels like an album that was recorded like at a dock on like a summer's weekend or something like that. A lot of good stuff. I think to me, some of the best Denny Lane material is on here. Children, Children, and Deliver Your Children, I think, are both great. The title track is awesome. With a Little Luck. For being like a completely obscure song that Paul has never once performed live, I think that is actually a phenomenal pop song. Really, really great. I like Name and Address too, the kind of Elvis pastiche. And then Girlfriend, the song that he gave to Michael Jackson. And then I guess he wrote it for Michael Jackson. Michael had heard about it, forgot about it, and then heard this record. And it was like, hey, I really like Girlfriend. I think I could sing it. And Quincy Jones was like, hey, Michael, you actually, this is your song. But in any case, Back to the Egg from 79. London Town, they had kind of dwindled down from the band that they had before into mostly a three-piece. Back to the Egg is kind of the preview of the Wings era that never really happened. Again, it's a bunch of kind of like stadium rock adjacent type of songs, mixed with some forays into disco type material, like Arrow Through Me, which I think has a great vocal on it. There's even a bit of jazz with Baby's Request. It is a little bit all over the place. It is a little bit unfocused, but it is one of the harder rocking Paul albums, and I think there is value in that. So it's worth a listen. I like it. And again, those two records, London Town and Back to the Egg, no reissue, no archive collection exists of them, so they're really difficult to find on CD. So really hoping they reconsider that and they reissue that at some point. Although it seems less and less likely with each passing year. All right. Stevie Wonder, Talking Book. I need to get a larger Stevie collection, which maybe sounds crazy because I have a lot of like the best ones. But to me, I think Stevie from early 70s, maybe even late 60s on is so incredibly consistent. Like I don't have Where I'm Coming From or Music of My Mind or any of that stuff. And that feels like a disservice. But Talking Book, yeah, without a doubt, unarguably, I think a stone cold classic. You Are the Sunshine of My Life. Superstition. And I Believe. The three most popular songs for damn good reason. I mean, Superstition has probably one of the best grooves that you have ever heard put onto a pop, R&B, funk track, whatever. And the fact that it is like majority Stevie Wonder playing on it, that's just the phenomenal thing about Stevie Wonder to me, is how incredible of a multi-instrumentalist he is while also happening to be blind. You know, the fact that he can get those drum beats, and he has a very unique drumming style. He's not a traditionally great drummer. He plays drums kind of in like, we see that with McCartney too, when he drums. It's very like, it's not natural. Like if drums are your first instrument, you were taught to drum in a certain way, like hi-hats go here, like toms go here. This is generally how you structure a song on the kit. This is how you structure a beat pattern. And people who don't have drums as their first instrument take a very different approach. Stevie will play it like a keyboard player would who's learning drums. Paul would play it like a guitarist, a bassist who's learning drums for the first time. It's just so interesting how those approaches differ and how you can hear that in their sounds as well. So Talking Book is great. But I kind of think that the three albums that follow it are even better. Inner Visions is just a towering piece of a record. So ridiculously good. The first side is for phenomenal tracks. Too High is all about groove. Visions and Golden Lady are beautiful, and Living for the City is one of the most aggressively like angry songs that Stevie's ever done. Again, I mean, you've moved on from that kind of social justice with a like sweet sheen vibe that you get on like Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Where it's a very powerful album. There's a lot of feelings attached there and a lot of observations, but it is all collected and kept in this very beautiful product. And Living for the City kind of takes that and just kind of throws it out there. Like, it's a great song, it's a great performance, but Stevie's pissed, and you can tell. And then that whole second side, with All in Love is Fair, which a lot of people I don't think consider a highlight of the record, but I think that is a remarkable ballad with one of the best just pure vocals he ever put to tape. Fulfilling This First Finale, a record that I think, here, show it right side up. This is a record that gets overlooked for sure in a lot of people's eyes. But you got some of the best Stevie material on the 70s on here, I think. Smile Please, Creepin', It Ain't No Use, They Won't Go When I Go. Holy shit, dude. That is a powerful song. You want to talk about people making music after having like near-death experiences, which we've had a few examples of so far in these videos. That is one right there. That one makes you reflect for sure. Songs in the Key of Life. What can you fucking say about this record? Jesus. It is possibly the best double album of all time. It might not be my favorite because the White Album exists, and the White Album might be my favorite album of all time by anybody. But in terms of like overall level of quality and execution and just enjoyment level for most people in that sense, Songs in the Key of Life is a winner through and through. It is a beautiful album. It is an album full of renewal and salvation, and optimism, but also like not being blind to the truth. I don't think I could listen to an album that has songs like Village Ghetto Land on it, or Black Man, or As, and think that, oh, this is just sunny optimism and that's all that this album represents. I think there's so much more here that Stevie Wonder talks about. And I really think because of that, like no matter how many gospel records I think I were to ever listen to in my lifetime, to me, I think this album represents spirituality and the good, genuine, pure side of being a spiritual person. I think it's more representative of that than any other record that I have heard or probably will ever hear. And there's not much more to say, except that the songs are bops, of course. Hotter Than July from 1980. Really good album. Dare I say it, great. Not much to see here, it's just lyrics, but again, it kind of overlooked based off of what came before it, although considering that, in some people's eyes at least, Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants is a flop of an album. Probably a much needed comeback for Stevie in some people's eyes. And there's a lot of creativity here. Like, it's a much tighter record, I think. Less ambitious than his previous projects, but a Stevie Wonder who focuses on groove is a Stevie Wonder that I have a lot of time for. So Did I Hear You Say You Love Me, All I Do, Master Blaster, just so fucking good. I Ain't Gonna Stand For It, the freaking country influence on that one. Yep, sold. Hotter Than July, fantastic album. And then here's In Square Circle, which I do think is a much less fantastic record, but I don't know. I definitely don't come close to disliking this album. I mean, I think this is still a really well done album, but I think this begins the period of Wonder records where he's not coasting on his laurels. I wouldn't quite accuse him of that, but he's not tapping into the same level of inspiration because he feels more content and secure with himself as a person. I think there's a lot of like exploration that he's doing in the mid 70s, and that comes to a head with Songs in the Key of Life because it feels like in that record he's still exploring, but it feels like he has found that passion and that salvation for the first time in his life. I think that is represented by the song Isn't She Lovely? Like, that's the joy of being a parent. He's experiencing that for the first time. And I think that is so representative of it. And I feel like after that, kind of gradually, you see that that desire to tap into these different spaces of himself diminish, because he doesn't need to, because he already has what he wants. And how can you fucking blame him for that? That's amazing. So all power to Stevie, even if his later records I don't really revisit that much. We are closing in on the end, folks. A couple of Yes records to show off. Here's Fragile. Fragile. Definitely not the first great Yes record, because I think the Yes album before this was excellent, but and it's not even my favorite Yes record, I don't think, but Fragile to me is where Yes transforms into the best version of themselves. The instrumental playing on these songs are like, it's just fantastic. Roundabout is like, that song alone I could go on for ages and ages about. It wasn't the first Yes song I ever heard, because Owner of a Lonely Heart exists, but it's the first one that I really got into and really explored, and I was like, wow, that's incredible. If I had to pick a favorite member of Yes, because I think that's always a question you ask, right? I don't know. I'm really partial to Chris Squire, but also, you know, the drummer in me wants to say Bill Bruford, even though he wasn't there for that long. And the kind of virtuoso lover in me wants to say Rick Wakeman, because Wakeman's keyboard playing is really just fun to watch and to listen to, but I digress. Close to the Edge is excellent for all the reasons that everybody says. You know, I don't think, like, if I were to tell people what I think the greatest pure progressive rock album is, I would probably say Close to the Edge. And if I had to say, like, in terms of like prog rock epics, you know, if I were to say a song that I think like is the definition of a great progressive rock epic, it is the title track here. I would put that over, you know, 2112. I would put that over any Genesis song that you were to throw out there, ELP, I don't know, Gentle Giant, whoever else. Close to the Edge is the kind of godfather of prog rock. It is that monolith that just, I don't think will ever be bested. Such a dynamic song, such great instrumentals and vocals and all the rest. It's a remarkable achievement. And the second side backs it up really well, which is something that an album like Rush's 2112, for instance, I don't think could do. And even like Genesis Selling England by the Pound, I don't think could do quite as effectively. Okay. And then randomly, I have the next Yes record, actually, Tales from Topographic Oceans. All the critiques that people have of this album, I think, are very fair. I do think it is a good album, but I agree that it is not one that I ever really want to listen to, because to listen to it is to make a time commitment that on a lot of occasions I simply do not have. For 20 plus minute songs, I mean, it's a slog. It's a slog. It's a good slog. It's usually a rewarding slog, but I'm not often in the headspace to where I want to listen to it. Jesse Colin Young, The Soul of a City Boy. This is cool. This was a random discovery that I made a number of years ago, and Jesse Colin Young, American folk artist, probably most notable for his time with the Youngbloods, and recording the song Get Together. But Jesse Colin Young, I listened to this album of his debut record for Capitol, and I was really struck by the atmosphere here. It's just him and his guitar, and a little bit of that like famous Capitol reverb that we've heard so much about, but it's so effective. And his voice, I am a sucker for his voice, man. It's very, you know, it has a bit of a crying quality to it, I suppose. I love how it like just kind of sits, just where it naturally sits, I think is very satisfying and pleasing. And yeah, I think, 4 in the Morning is probably one of his most famous songs, if not his most famous. And it's just really expressive. The whole album is expressive. I like the mixture of both folkier and bluesier elements to it. I dig it, man. I like it a lot. Would highly recommend. And we end with the Z's. So, of course, it probably means we're going to end with Frank Zappa, and you'd be correct if you guessed that. And I do include the Mothers of Invention when I talk about Frank Zappa, which, again, some people will disagree with that, and that's fine. There's a lot of fantastic Frank Zappa albums. I think Hot Rats is one of the best albums of the 1960s. I think a lot of the Mothers of Invention albums are terrific and really enjoyable, and I like them quite a bit. So you're probably wondering then why Cruising with Ruben and the Jets is going to be the last record that I show in this record collection tour. Why is that? Why is that? If you're not aware, Cruising with Ruben and the Jets is a doo-wop pastiche record. Frank Zappa has always had a great love and affection for doo-wop, and those themes do come up in his music from time to time, but this is just a straight up like pastiche record that he did. It is probably bar none the worst Zappa album that I've heard, although admittedly I've heard maybe like a third of his discography, if even. Why did I get it? Because I saw it at a store for $10 and I was like, sure, I'll get it. I don't come across Zappa albums that much at the places that I frequent, so I'll get it for the laughs. But yeah, I need to re-explore his stuff soon because I have not heard an album of his in quite a while, but I've always had a really good experience with it. It's his music is strange, but I think I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of Captain Beefheart, for instance, and I think Beefheart is a less accessible artist in a lot of ways than Frank Zappa is. And so I think a reappraisal of Zappa's music, whenever I get around to that, I think will be richly rewarding, and I look forward to it. So that in future I can talk about a Frank Zappa album that is not Cruising with Ruben and the Jets on this channel. But in any case, we are done. So I want to thank everyone so much for watching all 26 parts of this. For anyone who has made it through all 26 parts, that's really cool. And went through the 700 plus records that I have in my collection. Again, there's going to be the last part of this, the epilogue, afterward, whatever, where I talk about the records that I have accrued in my collection since this series started. All those many months ago. I even have YouTube up here. Let's just take a look. What was the first day that I uploaded a video? June 9th of 2023. So from June 2023 up until, I guess, December 2023, because I haven't bought any records in 2024 yet. We'll do a catch-up video. There's quite a few that we have to catch up on. I'm sure there's probably going to be like 50 in that video. So we'll see if I do it in 2 parts or if I do it as just one fell swoop. We'll see how the cookie crumbles there. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope this was entertaining and interesting, and I hope that my opinions and my takes were engaging enough to everybody. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more videos are to come. Hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. Thanks so much for watching again, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.